godson named Caleb.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Okay.
I'd like to thank
Man, of
everyone.
course, click got it.
I'd like to thank everyone who
Got
for
it.
coming.
Click got it with your mouse. Just click the got it where it says got it.
Oh, okay. We got that. So
There you go.
we had a little bit of issues earlier with a bunch of hacker punks. I'm like, this was supposed to be a very respectable thing. I kind of wish like we did. I said a lot of the people that would have known it likely would have been college students, and that would have been a very interesting experience to see. Heads of certain departments, saying you can't pull that. But I'm really glad to have the group that's here. We finally have the return of the wonderful Gary Carden. I'll let him start off. I said he's an amazing thing. If you had ever heard of blow the tannery whistle to play, that's a good thing. And shortest explanation is that was an old school version of Twitter for this area, because forget about a town crier. They literally just had a big tannery that had a whistle that would blow once every 8 hours to let you know when one shift began, and had it was that important, that's what it would be. So sorry, it's nice, but let's say take it to, I said, give you the mic. Gary.
Oh, turn my mic on.
Yes.
You're good. We can hear you. Read us a story.
Okay. Well, you want me to go ahead? Okay.
Yes. Gary.
Okay. I have got a piece here to read, but of course, I'm a storyteller, and this was originally a story, but I'm conforming to the medium here, and so this is all written down, but it's still a story I used to tell. Most storytellers will tell you that their best stories are frequently drawn from their worst experiences in life. I guess that is a blessing of the oral tradition, because it is transmutation. Moments of personal shame, anguish, suffering undergo a wonderful transition with the passage of time. Like William Wordsworth said, poetry emerges when it is recollected in tranquility. I have found rich deposits of whimsy and humor in unpleasant events that happened 60 years ago. For example, take the summer of 1954 when I worked for the Silverstein Tannery in Brevard. Following my father's death, my mother left me in the care of my grandparents, and she caught the bus to Knoxville. Consequently, I grew up in a remote cove in Jackson County, raised by two Scot-Irish couples who observed my peculiarity with anxiety. In addition to my obsession with comic books and cowboy movies, I frequently got in trouble in school. And by the time I reached high school, the teachers repeatedly expressed their concern about my inability to tell the difference between fantasy and reality. My grandfather's solution to all of this was to send me off to live with my uncle in Brevard for the summer. Put him to work, said my grandfather. Maybe he will get a dose of making a living and it'll straighten him out. So I came to work in the Silverstein Tannery, where my uncle was the bookkeeper. And I quickly acquired a job in the buffing room, which was next to a huge storage room, which was called the Green Hide Room. To the great amusement of my fellow workers, I immediately became ill from the tannery's foul smell. Green hides are covered with decaying flesh, which must be stripped away before the hides can be converted into shoe leather. The smell that emanates from that room was like a dark cloud over the tannery and the whole surrounding area. The company owned a cafe where all the workers ate, and it was next to the Green Hide Room, and it was called the Green Fly Cafe. After a week, I adjusted to the smell, and we managed to eat my daily portion of pintos, collard greens, and cornbread, and I finally got till I could do it with considerable gusto. Every worker had a tab at the cafe, and on payday, which was always on Saturday morning, that tab was deducted from your earnings for the week. And since the Green Fly also had punch boards and pinball machines, some workers actually ended up owing money to the store after they cashed their checks. The buffing room was located in a large barn-like structure, and its purpose was to convert inferior hides into acceptable shoe leather. This meant that thin hides that were pocked open with little holes had to be improved or brought up to minimum standards. Our job was to apply a nauseous yellow gunk to the hides. This operation had to be repeated many times and was carried out by placing the hides on a table where 4 workers stood around and with huge brushes strapped to their forearms and alternately dipped the brushes into that yellow gunk and then spread it like lemon cake icing over the hides. After the workers had created a thick layer, the hides were allowed to dry, and then each was placed on the buffing machine, which was a great metal cylinder, and it literally beat that gunk into the hides until it was absorbed. After each hide was buffed several times, it acquired an acceptable thickness and could be sold for low-grade leather. A bucket of water sat by each table, and when the brushes became clogged, we would clean them in the bucket. The water level in the bucket was always about half full because the buffing machine actually caused the floor to shift like the deck of a ship, and the water sloshed back and forth in rhythm to the machine. All of this created a definite noise, and it rendered all conversation impossible. We all learned to communicate in a kind of a buffing room mime with great gestures and facial expressions. Basically, work in the buffing room was mentally numbing, and the workers developed a mindless, repetitive routine which lasted for 2-hour intervals. We received 2 15-minute breaks, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and they were deducted from our pay. During the break, the workers would go to the toilet, or they'd walk out on the loading deck and smoke, or just stare aimlessly around. Many simply sat on the floor next to the workstation. I remember one colorful fellow who climbed on the buffing machine during the break and preached to his fellow workers, exhorting them to find Jesus. Besides me, my workstation was occupied by Lil, who was a gigantic blonde woman who resembled Boris Karloff, a small man named Wesley, who constantly hummed and yodeled cowboy songs. And then during one break, we had a talkative man named Maynard, who kept up a constant monologue about his exploits, hunting, fighting, epic drunks. And during the break, Lil would lay on the floor, inept as a fallen tree, and sleep. Wesley did a passing good imitation of his hero, Eddie Arnold, and his all-time favorite cattle call. When Wesley yodeled, Maynard and I would flee to the loading dock where Maynard talked about his Saturday nights, which he spent driving around Brevard with a bottle of John Paul Jones whiskey and a paper sack full of cherry bombs, which he brought every Saturday afternoon in South Carolina, where both whiskey and fireworks were available. His greatest joy in life consisted of lighting cherry bombs and pitching them out the window of his car when he passed a crowd of people at a theater or a church. He especially liked frightening the residents of Carver Street. And this is, of course, the black community in Brevard. Sometimes the monotony of the buffing machine routine was broken by a visit from the owner. He wore fancy riding pants and carried a little leather jockey whip, which he constantly accompanied by two poodles. And sometimes I would look up from spreading the gunk on the hides and find him watching me. Usually he would say something like, faster, faster. And the dogs would all bark at us. Then he'd pop his whip against his pants leg and he'd walk away to watch the buffing machine. I lasted 2 months at the Silverstein Tannery. When I received word that my grandfather was willing to let me return home, provided I meet certain conditions, I collected my last check, which was $12, and I boarded a Trailway bus for Silva. However, during my last week, Maynard took 2 days of sick leave and then returned with the lower part of his face encased in adhesive tape. And it occurred to me that he looked a bit like the mummy. And I got a kick out of watching him and Leo shuffle around like they were in a Frankenstein laboratory. Maynard had a little slit cut in the mouth of his adhesive tape so he could insert a lucky strike. For the first time since I had known Maynard, I was genuinely curious about his weekend adventure. When the buffing machine finally shut down for the morning break, Wesley, let it go. I followed Maynard out to the dock and watched as he carefully poked a cigarette into the slit, lit his cigarette up. Hey, Maynard, what happened to you? I said. It was a little hard to understand him since he had lost most of his teeth. But this is the gist of what he said. Well, last Saturday, after drawing my pay, I drove down to South Carolina to the line where I bought a fifth of JPJ, John Paul Jones, and a sack of cherry bombs. And I come on back to Brevard because I knowed that there was a big church revival on Carver Street. So I sat outside that church till almost midnight, sipping my John Paul Jones and listening to WNOX in Knoxville. Drunk that whole fifth. And about the time that the church finally let out, and it was striking midnight on the town clock, them folks come pouring out of that church. Well, I rolled the window down. I used my cigarette. I lit one of them cherry bombs, and I throwed my cigarette out at them people, and then I put that cherry bomb in my mouth. Recently, I read a regional newspaper about the history in Brevard. They intended to publish an oral history of the region's tanneries, and they were soliciting personal reminiscences from former employees. And suddenly it all came back to me, the green fly, the buffing machine, them white poodles, Leo sleeping by her workstation. I'm not sure if nostalgia is the appropriate word for my memories, And I have serious doubts about the Historical Society wanting to know how I really feel about the Silverstein tannery, the green hides, and the buffing machine. However, I admit that every time I think of Maynard with that cherry bomb in his mouth, I laugh.
Oh, I love that story. I remember when you told it on your the last birthday you had at Say Lights. That was an amazing time. Wasn't blow the tannery whistle like everyone thought, but I'm like going, I know this story, and it's it's just special. Got a little problem with your signal, Gary. Okay, there you. Yeah, you're kind of getting all wavy, and I don't know if anyone else can see that, but
no, we can see here. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, just interference. It's kind of trippy. It's almost like anything now you expect the max headroom to exist, and that crowd we had previously might as well have been that thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. So,
well, thank you, Gary. That was lovely.
Yes,
that was great.
Yeah. So, Brandon, you were the next one to kind of sign in and said, "Do you have something to read?"
Yeah, I have a little bit here.
Okay.
It's like a story poem thing.
Oh, goody.
It's called The Shouting and the Screaming. Here they come. Here they come. They're rushing towards you to tell you everything you can't bear to hear. You lie on the ground and you curl up into a ball and you scream, trying to drown them out, but they're so loud, so much louder than you. And you know they're right. You hate that they're right. And you're afraid of what might happen if anyone else heard them. So you stand up and, still screaming, you strangle one of them until it's quiet and limp. And the others shout louder, and you scream louder, and you strangle each of them louder and louder and louder until it's only you, the loudest scream, and everyone's heard you, and everyone's rushing to see what's wrong. And you try to tell them, but you can't stop screaming. And you try to show them everything you strangled, but it's gone. It's all gone. It's the end of that one.
That sounds good.
And then this is a very short untitled. Life is going to work. Death is going home.
That's
here.
Very poetic.
Thank you. Thank you. I got two more, I guess. I'll read.
Okay. We've got time.
These roses and my rotting teeth will live to see the end of all life, and nothing will swallow the stars. And then here's the last one. Nothing's affected me. Born to split open, born to shine for you. Sewer spirit, opaque and unresponsive. Unpredictable, unavoidable. Catalyst for everything you forgot to forget. Taking shape, structural sickness. Unforgiving void, stitched up and fidgeting. Stop being so afraid of me. The end.
All right. Okay, Dr. Carter, you said, do you have anything you'd like to share?
I will read a poem.
Yay!
Yay!
Yes.
So this one is called Disaster, Walking. And it is about my life as a clumsy person. I'm a very clumsy person. I fall over things a lot. And my mother has a cameo in it, which she, doesn't always like. But it begins with a slightly mangled quote from the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. And that is not because I really know anything about Hindu epics. It is because this quotation is what Robert Oppenheimer is supposed to have said after the first tests of the atomic bomb. So this is Disaster Walking. I am come like time, the waster of peoples, like death, the destroyer of worlds. Where the marsh shelters a rare sea aster, there I trip, stagger, and crush. Where a sprinkler head lurks in long grass, there my blind heel falls, smashing and shattering. If the lid of a jar in the cupboard is loose, I seize that jar, and the ensuing crash, the splash of vinegar and glass are vast. These feet are drawn to slicks of algae, plasters of mud, these shins to sharp corners, these fingers to burners that blister and ratchets that bruise. I bite my own cheeks, poke my own eyes. The sleeve of my shirt snags the toilet paper holder, yanks it right out of the wall. If I tug on a shade, it unfurls forever. Never master of my hands, avatar of chaos and entropy, I stumble across the earth's crust, slipping, dropping, doing damage, sometimes slow, sometimes fast as a javelin hurled by some three-eyed god of not so random. At last, even my mother said, "You are a walking disaster." And who should know better than she, who opened the gates of flesh to free me, who loosed me upon this world? Thank you.
That was quite poetic.
That was wonderful. That was delightful.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of the song Death on Two Legs. I'm like, well, not it's a death everyone but the actual character. It's like, how did they survive? It's at the movie. Well, it said they were the ones that had to cause everything. Yes. Okay.
So I think it may be you, Matt.
Yes. I've got another song lyrics thing, and I wanted to do this particular group for a while, but I'm like, I just never really. I just didn't know. I said I'd try to find others because I was kind of hoping to maybe send it off, for maybe Brandon to read, just because he would have liked it. But I'm like, you know what? This really has to be more autobiographical, especially with somebody that is mentioned, and you'll probably pick up on who they are if you know who them and you see if you've seen the movie that song was a part of. Okay, and I call this one More Scottish Twins, and that's the question because Brandon requested to the Cocteau Twins, and this is another set of twins from Scotland, and I'm like, okay, that's a good way to have it. I guess that having an active imagination has its perks, as the real world is often a little dull, or doesn't provide distraction from the news. And the simple things no longer provide enough joy without the leftovers from dreams to drown out the awkward silence and white noise. And in my home, there are a few moments to process whatever information filled my head and possibly go onto a notepad, where in time I could uncover how to take it farther with more words to serve as the first attack in the battle against boredom. And with a few memories of things that made me smile, I'm on my way to creating worlds with characters from the other side of curiosity that I hope one day to share with my friends. Even if I have to reside in the world of words, I'm gone to a place where anything can happen. And a book cover in a mix instead of a beloved show gave me inspiration for a world of magic beings where, after tragedy strikes, a young man must hit the highway to discover unnatural things lurking in really strange places, that even stranger shadows fall in an attempt to rebuild the world by reaping the great fortunes of those who can't fight back against evil. And sometimes it's the fools who desire power in order to take control over their lives, which proves everyone's a victim of the unfair hand that fate gladly plays. No matter what happens, every day I try to find some new detail to create some distraction from the pain of a normal life, where I've watched life passing by and the life of a better future becomes too hard to look at, if not nearly dull, with a few teardrops ready to fall as a reminder that I'm human. And even when things are going well, it's what makes you cry that provides the strength to keep going down any road a little easier. And if we harness pain, it's possible to hold on to happier memories so that in time, when we venture an act of remembrance, we can hold on to the pain along with our new joys. One thing that I enjoy about writing is that I can be a new me. That's the part that really matters. Using a voice that most of society isn't prepared for, as wherever you roam, someone will always be ready to lend an ear during the times where everything seems misty blue from too many tears falling, said falling from eyes, well, said long enough to see a new path and good people who could say, dance with me, was said while wearing colossal fruit hats to prove that not everyone is turning away from those who need support. Over a decade ago, I basically ran away from home, and I knew that I'm going to be in a better place as the familiar destination over 500 miles away drew closer, and my old life faded into the vast sea of asphalt navigated by some of the only people who have stayed in the long haul with me, as the family tree is nothing more than a tiny bush that stands too close to a land fit for zeros and traders. He said, some people have told me to keep faith no matter what, but I've seen one too many tragedies in dire need of a ray of sunshine to prove that I don't have to search for some new religion that is quick to condemn the faults in people, because whatever you got weaving into the tapestry of your fate was in fact made by a higher power, said, who couldn't make mistakes, and said, if we're born innocent into a world full of such terrible evil, being accepted by normal people makes anyone feel redeemed with every earned smile. One problem that I've endured of late is a lack of people who to talk to. But my old friend the blues stays with me no matter where I go, and it's hard to feel forever young with a very old soul in need of the wonders of the past, forged in your childhood with things weren't so hard, where time slipped by with play being pushed to the back of everyone's mind, like a flame growing dimmer from inadequate fuel while trapped too close to the wind, and if one sets their moral compass to the brilliance of the once said flame, it's easy to get lost without friends who saw you as a role model to provide some much needed support. There is no one left to blame but yourself, and the fragile light finally goes out. I'm just going to be, I heard something on that one. No matter what we do, our lives can change quickly because we have too many unguarded moments, creating openings for anything to happen. And there's no doubt some people experience more times of darkness than joy because it's a lot easier to earn wages of sin, said, as it's the path of least resistance. And sometimes there is enough overtime to make the experience of being on a slow burner that barely provides enough heat to prevent tender hearts from freezing over, and the gray sky takes the soul off towards anything to provide joy. But soon the day is over and done with, leaving too little time for a glimpse. It's a glimpse at hope before sleep that doesn't affect the restless soul inside us all that longs to be set free. My life was a mess before I went to open mic, and then I met you. The established members, out from the veil of uncertainty, encouraged me to find my voice amongst a group of classy people also trying to find a way to express themselves. But it broke my heart when we had to stay apart during a time when life held on by a thread, and every now and then I try to reach out to see how many familiar faces I have to look forward to during our reunion, and the thought of you leaving this world said before we can have a chance to share more said more laughs is awful, because after you're gone, it said it would be almost impossible for me to find new friends, and there's no witness to see that I'm in trouble. And even the brief smile someone gave me from across the room is the medicine I need to make my heart fly back to places I nearly forgot. It said, you can ignore the blood on your hands from not being everyone's cup of tea, as it's tainted with distrust. But I said, but with the return of friends, the more I believe there is a place for people like me to find a reason to smile and stand in recognition of lasting so long that with every step I take, I'm closer to salvation. And I say, come on, nature, I can walk a little longer. So for any new readers who are alarmed with my darkness, please note, I said I have a way with words, and for some occasions, the long black veil has to make an appearance to reveal the strange process that the author has for turning song titles into stories in place of notes and rhymes to give life to great ideas that slowly take shape as a list of titles are selected to stretch a few words into lines that may wield a strange power to bring others back into the light with a chance to discover the beautiful truth that in the depths of the human soul, said we all have a mix of chaos and compassion that has to be fostered to share such delights. And if I'm still around to see others, said around me smile from my creations, then my writing has done its job. I said with one more down, I can't wait to see what I can create next. Yep. So,
Woo!
yes.
I agree. I absolutely agree with Catherine. Painful and brave.
Yeah. You guys want to
There's-
take a guess at the at who they were?
I want to say Alphaville.
No.
Damn, because I
It's-
think that they sing. Don't they sing Forever Young? That's the one that
No.
stuck out to me.
That's not their greatest hit. These guys were actually the Proclaimers, the guys who did the 500-mile song
Really?
from Benny and June.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was like, I didn't actually realize, they've been around for so long. They just don't really chart too well over in America, but in Europe,
Right.
that's what they have.
Did you use 500 miles?
Well, I broke it up. Just the fact that
Okay.
it said it basically it's I'm gonna be and then 500 miles. That's the actual full title.
Yeah.
So when they kind of have a parentheses or a comma in that, I just turn those into two separate ones. That way, it's a little harder to guess.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep.